Where there are people, there are laws. Laws that keep people from killing each other. That is what we call society. Digital art and its community has a lot of laws that many of us abide by. But after drawing and improving from this to this in 4 years, I realized that breaking the law has many benefits, if you can get away with it. So in order to ruin the art community, I made this video with a classic clickbaity thumbnail and a sellout title.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
Oh, be quiet. I'm not really trying to clickbait you. If I really wanted to, I'd add more red arrows, make the word illegal capitalized, and maybe add a face somewhere acting surprised. A lot like Ethan Becker. He's really good at it. I'm actually here to just justify my illegal practices, because I use them every single day. However, the reason these tips are illegal is because they can be dangerous. Like a weapon, they can be used properly for good reasons, or to hurt others and even yourself by accident. I'm sure these tips will help you improve as an artist because they have done so for me, especially in creating art for my original character Tuzi in the last 4 years. Let's start off hot. A lot of artists and creatives on YouTube will fawn over the idea of proper knowledge of anatomy, shading, shapes, and whatever. And they are correct. Don't get this tip wrong. It's not don't learn the rules. You have to learn something in order to forget it. There is a saying in art, learn the rules before you break them. Having good anatomy is pretty good in drawing, I do have to say. But the thing is, you don't always have to follow it if you don't need to. Take this drawing right now as an example. My sketch style is really loose, the perspective is insane, and am I really following perfect anatomy? Art is really a place where you can do whatever you want, and stretching or exaggerating reality to convey a feeling in an art piece is perfectly acceptable. As much as people harp on anatomy, stuff like anime, for example, hardly follows it. Look at how big these heads are. Funnily enough, breasts are the most common anatomical mistake in all of art, but people often forget about it because they understand they are often made bigger for a reason. Even masters like Michelangelo exaggerated anatomy on his sculpture of David, making his hands bigger for an effect. The creation of Adam also has a small anatomical change. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know yours was that small too. I didn't mean to make you feel insecure down there. I guess you might not be convinced talking about cherries and eggplants, but I get it. Saying you should forget about anatomy and showing examples of style is obvious. Like duh, no one's gonna complain about the anatomy of Grunkle Stan because it's a cartoon. People are usually more critical of inconsistency in art, like an arm bigger than the other or an eye smaller than the other. Well, if consistency mattered so much, then why aren't images of anime figures considered perfect anime art? This photo of the anime figure I made technically has perfect artistic anatomy, form, shading, blah blah blah. Since it was designed in 3D space, it is consistent from whatever angle you look at it. But when you look at this image and then the painting, one feels more expressive, more intense. Even if I reposed a 3D model and altered the lens distortion to match the artwork, it won't look anatomically consistent or realistic at all. But the artwork feels fine, doesn't it? The reality is, breaking the rules and having inconsistencies is what makes art feel better than reality.
Even for the basic layout of the city, we bent all the rules to exaggerate perspective and customize each shot for graphic and emotional intent.
Of course, this isn't an excuse to say, my lack of anatomy skills are actually my art style. Shut up! If you decide to throw away anatomy or shading or whatever rule of art, it has to be intentional. Stealing is a crime, but I don't care. Many YouTubers have started selling out by making titles like this to generate views anyways. But stealing in the digital art community is a weird subject because people think it's black and white like this. Well, let's test this theory. What if I decided to steal from this art piece and I stole half the pose? Is it stealing? Okay. What if I stole half the pose, but at certain random parts of it? If I technically stole 3% of this piece, isn't that just called being inspired? If there was a slider to see how much stealing an artist does before their piece looks exactly like the original, then you'd realize that stealing is a huge spectrum, and where you define stealing as immoral is opinionated. For this piece, I blatantly steal color schemes from this artwork, simply color dropping from it in the corner. This is because the color scheme and background for this art piece worked perfectly for what I was going for. The desert and blue sky with brown and green, but also a bright red for the blood. It had the colors for all the elements I wanted to include in my art piece. Now, am I stealing from someone? I guess I am. But can someone really own colors? People often say don't trace or steal poses, but honestly, I'd suggest for any beginning artist to throw away the moral rules related to art and just trace, copy, and steal all you want in order to improve. I should have done it back when I was starting out. For my beginner self in 2020, I color picked by myself and, well, I kind of failed at backgrounds. I only learned how to do proper backgrounds later by just using images and drawing over them. This is an image, this is one, this, but slowly you gain experience and make your own original backgrounds. This is not to say you should always steal. Stealing does mean you can't make it yourself, which might make you a weaker artist. If I stole colors from this piece, did it mean I'm not good enough to color pick my own colors? Maybe. So it might be wise to ensure, again, that you understand the rules before you break them. Just make sure your stealing is less blatant. You shouldn't steal something and then try to argue it's yours, especially if your art is commercial and becomes popular. Depends if you want to be politically correct. Either way, I don't care because it helps me make better art faster. This anime figure of Tutsu uses tons of 3D assets from other people that are slightly altered. I stole what wasn't mine, but does that really mean this artwork was stolen? It's up to you to decide. People in the art community usually try to be nice and understanding, but I'm not here for that. You should be quicker when making art. Okay, perhaps that's a bad way of putting it. You should try your best to become more skilled in creating art in a shorter amount of time. Of course, this varies between art forms, but digital art can usually be made rather quickly. It's a beneficial skill. For one, time is money, so if you're making art for companies or a job, you gain an advantage. The second reason is that pushing yourself to make art faster forces you to be a smarter artist. Logically, making digital art shouldn't take too much time. If you watch speed paints, you can see how it's just a couple of strokes here and there. So, if you could somehow magically remember where to put every single line and piece of paint, then shouldn't making art take less than 5 minutes? Instead, most of the time is spent deciding what to do. This is you when you're making art. There's a goal, what you imagine the art piece to be when it's finished, and each stroke is a step to that goal. But that means a decision is born. You have to decide which to go for. The issue here is that many artists take way too long to decide because they are scared. I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't take your time or relax when making art. It's just that you should try to improve your decisiveness and efficiency when making art. Even if you're just a casual artist in it for the fun, it's still an important skill to have. When I was starting out, I spent months on an art piece because, well, as a beginner, you keep striving to replicate what's better, but you don't have the proper skills to do so. For example, this piece took about a month to make and I hated every second of it. It felt dreadful to come back to this piece over and over again with hardly any progress over days. Fast forward to now, this piece, which is remarkably better, was made in just 7 hours between 2 afternoons. The simple fact is, if you spend too much time on something, it will get boring or repetitive. If you're making art for fun, it shouldn't feel like a job, but unfortunately, if you do feel that way, it's probably your fault. So to all those girls constantly complaining, "Oh, I hate rendering, oh my god, I'm so bad," you are right, you are bad. I suggest setting a deadline for your artworks. Having pressure makes you act more decisively and in turn trains you to be a more confident artist. Challenges are a good way to do this. Do an art trade with your friends, try art contests, take a class, or put a bomb under your chair. Just watch popular artists if you don't believe me. You can see how in a 4-hour live stream they can make a full art piece with lines and color better than most people can in a week, and it's all from up there. Now, I just spoke about being decisive, so why would you want to be spontaneous? Well, they aren't the same thing actually. Let's again think of making art as a journey to a goal. After all, being decisive only exists if you have a direction to go. But let's say there is no goal. Now you are being random because your decision is based on no direction. Now, what if you had a goal and decided to be random anyways? Decided to be spontaneous? To make it easier to understand, I'll illustrate with an example here. When I was making this art piece, I wanted blood splatter around the character to frame the composition and to show the slice of the weapon. But it didn't look that good and the blood kind of looked like fabric. So at some point I just randomly brushed red on the edges of the frame and put it on multiply. And guess what? It turned into this. Art is hard because sometimes you never know what will make your art piece better. Therefore, often you can rely on chance. Basically, what I'm trying to tell you is, while you should be decisive, you don't always have to decide to go towards the goal or even think about where you're going. You can always take a detour or even backtrack. After all, you don't really have anything to lose when the undo button is right there and you have a million layers. So, next time you're making an art piece, try being spontaneous. Most of modern science was founded through the concept of doing random crap and seeing what would happen. The final tip I have is the most important out of all of these, so pay attention. Often people say how details make the difference, and it's true sometimes. Details refer to a lot of things, so it's hard to say if this quote is really true. Then again, quotes are subjective. Small details in stories or character traits really add an extra depth to the art form, but here I'm talking about visual details. Those don't really matter. Is detail bad? No. Artworks with perfect line art, intricate drawn designs, and perfectly placed shapes are beautiful. Detail or the lack of detail all depends on style, intention, and effect. Neither is really better than the other. In my artwork, the detail on the face is more abundant than in the background or body to bring more focus to the head. So, why am I saying that details don't matter? They do. I'd be insulting half the art community if I said that they didn't matter. But what I'm trying to say is that they don't matter as much as this. Take a look at these two pieces of art. They are both blurred. Now, which one do you think is better? Can you assume what this one is about? What about this one? What do you feel? You probably chose this one despite both being blurred messes. Why? It's because creatures with eyes are very good at discerning information from color, shading, and shapes. It's just how evolution works. You know, this is the Mona Lisa, and this is Starry Night, and that this is something you should hide from your parents. The reality is, once you get to this, a rough of your artwork, the art piece is more than 70% done. If you compare the rough to the end piece, it's very similar, and the rough took a few minutes to make, while the end piece took hours to finalize rendering and add details. That is why, if we rewind, I finished the rough first to see how the piece felt, and then finished the sketch. I didn't even sketch the clothes, background, or proper anatomy. I just needed to see how the whole piece felt because that's what really mattered. The details only enhance an art piece, they can't carry it. This is why many artists have suggested taking a step back and looking at your art. It helps hide the details when you're farther away. This works well for physical art pieces, but if you are digital, you can use a blur filter, or I prefer this oil paint filter. It breaks an art piece into colored shapes, and you can see how much you can understand without the details. And perhaps this is the most important tip that relates to all the others. A rough breaks all the laws of art. It has broken forms and anatomy, often has stealing, is made quickly, and allows for random exploration. And despite this, it's the most important step of making an art piece. Now that's the end of my tips. Let's review what we learned. If you forget the rules, steal, be quick, be spontaneous, and hide the details, you will be a proper criminal. But being real here, breaking the laws as an artist is fun because there aren't any real repercussions. Many rules and laws were founded by the art community to prevent you from making mistakes. But sometimes, it's best to make the mistake to know why the rules were made in the first place. Otherwise, you'd just be another sheep in a herd. You would never understand the dangers that lurk outside, and you'd never have the strength to journey freely, like many of the masters have. As always, check out my channel, I'm broke, and be sure to make some more fun.